Once every 15 years, God unleashed hordes of monsters upon the world. These creatures were relentless. Humanity's attempts to combat them proved futile. People had no choice but to hide, cowering in fear. The story begins with the harrowing tale of the first Judgment Day, when unexpectedly monsters poured forth from ordinary mines deep within the earth. They left destruction and death in their wake, killing millions and reducing cities to rubble. Humanity found itself thrust into a war against these monstrous invaders, but it was a battle they could not win. Eventually, they managed to exterminate the creatures, and on the ruins of the mines, they constructed protective installations known as gates, designed to shield them from future incursions. 15 years passed, and the world managed to recover, albeit partially, from the horrors of the past. One survivor was Laura, a school worker. She had a persistent, albeit unsuccessful suitor named Milton, whom she frequently turned down for dates. This rejection stemmed from her lingering resentment toward her ex-husband Dave. During the first Judgment Day, Dave had abandoned Laura while she was pregnant, forcing her to endure the cataclysm alone. Despite their turbulent history, Laura and Dave shared a son, 15-year-old Tyler. Tyler spent his days at the skate park with friends, particularly his girlfriend, Maddie. In his free time, he immersed himself in computer games, unwittingly becoming a pawn in the contentious relationship between his estranged parents. As the days rolled on, tension mounted once more. An impending eclipse signaled the potential return of the monsters, while increased seismic activity led to emergency checks of the protective domes. Alarming reports of mass fish extinctions and migrations echoed the ominous signs of 15 years past. One weekend, Tyler stayed with his father, Dave, when an unexpected phone call disrupted their routine. Dave's old friend, Ted, was convinced that a new Judgment Day was imminent. Urgently, he implored Dave to gather his family and take refuge in his shelter before the impending eclipse. Meanwhile, beneath the protective dome, a monstrous intruder silently ascended a staircase, lurking in the shadows. Laura called Dave, her voice trembling with fear, having seen the distressing news. She demanded that Dave return Tyler to her immediately. Milton had secured a shelter, and Laura believed it was their only hope for survival. Dave reassured her, asserting his role as Tyler's father and guaranteeing his safety. Tyler received a text message during the conversation and, unnoticed by his father, slipped out of the house. Panic engulfed Laura as she implored Dave to retrieve Tyler immediately, her anxiety heightened by the insecurity of Dave's home. Dave agreed and hastened to Tyler's room, but the boy was nowhere to be found. Milton hurried Laura, explaining that their shelter was quickly filling up and they needed to depart immediately. Laura revealed her fruitless search for Tyler, prompting Milton to use Tyler's phone location to track him down at the skate park. Indeed, Tyler was at the park consoling a frightened Maddie who had been abandoned by her parents. Trembling, Maddie pleaded with Tyler not to leave her alone, a promise he solemnly vowed to uphold. Suddenly, a cacophony of bird cries pierced the air as enormous flocks soared in a singular direction, causing a stampede of panic-stricken people in the park. As the town's residents fled, Dave headed to the park in search of Tyler. Stuck in a colossal traffic jam, he abandoned his vehicle and continued on foot, desperate to reunite with his son. Simultaneously beneath the protective dome, an unsuspecting worker checked instruments. Mysterious rustling and eerie sounds signaled the arrival of a monstrous creature, which swiftly attacked and tore the worker asunder. Nearby soldiers opened fire, but their bullets proved ineffective against the formidable foe. With the city descending into chaos, Laura arrived with Milton and rushed to the shelter where they had secured seats. Less than an hour remained before the eclipse would begin. However, upon their arrival, they were met with military barricades, permitting only women and children to enter. Dave implored Tyler to take care of his mother and guided them toward the shelter's entrance. Reluctantly, Laura and Maddie joined the crowded shelter. Tyler, torn between his father and the safety of the shelter, couldn't bear to leave Dave behind. Laura and Maddie followed him, shouting for him to return. In that critical moment, a message flashed on the scoreboard. The shelter was completely filled and there were no more vacancies. The fate of Tyler and his family hung in the balance as they faced the impending eclipse and the terrifying uncertainty of what awaited them outside the shelter's walls. Without a moment to spare, they hurried to their car. Dave suggested heading to Ted's desert hideout, while Milton proposed taking refuge in the nearby school's basement. However, their escape was hampered once again by a traffic jam blocking the road. Frustrated, they exited the car. Suddenly, the ground trembled as an earthquake shook the area, casting a shadow over the sun. The eclipse had commenced. Beneath the protective dome, monstrous creatures began to emerge, swarming the city in a multitude of forms, crawling, flying, and capturing it in their deadly grip. Dave urged the group to leave the city immediately, recognizing the imminent danger. He intended to drive, but Milton vehemently objected, claiming ownership of the car and insisting he knew the best way to save everyone. A heated argument ensued between Dave and Milton. However, their dispute was abruptly interrupted when a flying monster swooped down and seized Milton, soaring into the sky with him. Laura's anguished scream filled the air, and Dave hastily pushed her into the car. They desperately attempted to escape the nightmarish scene, driving along a canal. Dave attempted to reassure the children, insisting that everything would be all right and they would make it out. Their journey was cut short as the car's fuel ran perilously low. Dave decided to search for a replacement vehicle among the several abandoned ones ahead. To his surprise, he found an elderly man hiding in the back seat of one car. Their eyes met, and they both observed a colossal, bloodied monster that resembled a bull's skeleton. It was dangerously close. However, the monstrous bull passed by without noticing them and began to feast on a lifeless body. Dave stealthily rolled the car back to Laura and the kids. Now, both cars stood side by side, but they needed a way to transfer everyone to the new vehicle. As the bull finally noticed them, the elderly man courageously stepped out of the car and sprinkled salt from a jar he was holding onto the bull. The bull froze, allowing the children and Laura to flee to Dave's car. Yet, the bull turned its fury toward the man, tearing him apart as Dave sped away. Amid the mounting chaos, hordes of monsters streamed into the city from all directions. Dave led them down an isolated mountain road until they reached Ted's hideout. It proved to be a sturdy concrete bunker equipped with cameras on the roof, but there was no response when they knocked on the door. It was tightly shut. Inside, Ted sat before a monitor, a gun pressed against his neck by an unseen assailant. Meanwhile, monstrous creatures assembled in a horde along the mountainside, advancing directly toward the shelter. Dave grasped a tire iron, ready to protect his family, but just as the monsters reached the shelter, the bunker's doors swung open and they rushed inside. Dave joyfully embraced Ted, who introduced his wife Stella, already inside the bunker, and a silent military man seated in the corner, Corporal Garrett Jensen. Ted welcomed them, motioning for Dave to approach him meaningfully. However, Garrett suddenly drew his gun, forcing Dave to drop a concealed knife. Garrett explained that he had discovered this hideout while trying to hide, and, despite Ted's objections, Stella had let him in. He had survived the previous Judgment Day and was determined to survive this one, regardless of the cost. As the tense atmosphere persisted, Maddie inquired how the monsters could sense their presence, whether they could see through walls. Garrett smirked and replied that they reacted to light, heat, but perhaps they could perceive the soul. Laura asked if Garrett was religious, to which he responded affirmatively, declaring that on Judgment Day, even he believed in God. He recounted his harrowing experience during the first Judgment Day when he had taken refuge in a pool of salty mud, listening as monsters slaughtered 150 of his friends and colleagues. Engrossed in his story, Garrett failed to notice Ted signaling Dave to retrieve the knife. Dave understood and discreetly reclaimed it. Garrett continued, explaining the significance of the day's name, Judgment Day, as it was a time when the devil reigned supreme. Suddenly, a centipede-like monster slithered through a hole in the mesh covering the window. Ted swiftly removed it from Stella's neck and doused it in salt. Dave seized Garrett's gun and eliminated the creature. More monsters followed, but the group managed to fend them off. Dave then observed a massive bull-like creature approaching, seemingly summoned to aid the monsters. Realizing their impending doom, they decided to evacuate the bunker. The bull relentlessly pounded on the doors. Ted hesitated, not wanting to leave Stella behind, but she urged him to go with the others, revealing the presence of an underground passage leading to the mountains. Garrett persuaded them to take him along, offering his car with a full tank to transport them to the safety of the gates where bunkers were located. He assured them that the creatures would not return there. Although they were skeptical, they agreed to his plan, armed themselves with Ted's weapons, and prepared to make their escape. The bull's relentless attacks on the bunker doors only reinforced their urgency. They fled through the tunnel to the car, but Stella fell ill. Dave and Laura engaged in a heated argument as they grappled with the difficult decision to leave her behind. Their escape was now in motion, but their journey ahead was fraught with peril as they raced against time, battling monstrous horrors and an uncertain fate outside the bunker's safety. As they continued their perilous journey, Tyler suddenly spotted a lifeless monster at the roadside. Maddie approached it, unaware of the danger lurking beneath. Sinister tentacles erupted from a hole in the ground, ensnaring her legs and attempting to drag her away. Maddie's wild screams filled the air, prompting Tyler and Dave to rush to her rescue. Garrett offered his assistance, and Dave swiftly cut the tentacles, liberating Maddie from their grasp. Determined to find safety, they ascended a nearby mountain. From this vantage point, they gazed upon a city in ruins, consumed by flames. Desperation forced them back to their car, but it refused to start. Monsters suddenly appeared atop the mountain, hurtling towards them with relentless intent. Garrett desperately attempted to start the car's engine, while Stella contemplated the crowd of approaching monsters. Her gaze shifted to the gun in her husband's trembling hands. She drew her own weapon and exited the car, leaving Ted to plead with her. Ignoring his pleas, Stella ventured towards the encroaching monsters, accepting her grim fate. Ted called out to her, tears streaming down his face, but Dave forcibly stuffed him into the car. At the last moment, they managed to escape, evading the pursuing hordes of monsters. During their frantic escape, they stumbled upon a radio signal revealing that most shelters had succumbed to the relentless assault and lay in ruins. Laura placed her hand on Dave's shoulder as he sought solace in her presence. Upon reaching the gate, they discovered it to be empty, with the doors ajar. Garrett indicated the presence of a hidden hideout in the basement. However, power needed to be restored before they could take refuge there. Garrett and Dave volunteered to do so, while the others ventured in search of a first aid post for Ted's back wound. Dave successfully restored electricity, and Garrett explained that the gate had been fortified for a potential second invasion, with tons of salt pumped into it. Unfortunately, the well had been too deep. Rejoining the others, they were suddenly confronted by monstrous roars and discovered a bloodied corpse. With just 2 hours remaining until the eclipse's end, Garrett suggested seeking refuge in a chemical warehouse with impenetrable doors. As they made their way, a monster attacked Garrett, forcing him to fight for his life. Dave joined the battle, but the noise drew more monsters to their location. Garrett swiftly escaped through a door and locked it behind him, injecting himself with an ominous substance as his veins swelled and darkened. Dave rejoined his family, entrusting Tyler with protecting his mother, while he embarked on a dangerous mission. He aimed to redirect salt water through the tank pipes to deter the approaching monsters. Laura kissed Dave and implored him to be cautious. Venturing through the ventilation system, Dave observed a monster devouring its prey. His mission was to shut off the taps next to the feeding monster. After successfully opening the faucet and collecting water in containers, Dave began his retreat. However, the monster sensed his presence and pursued him. A harrowing battle ensued, culminating in Dave using salt to disintegrate the creature into dust. Meanwhile, the rest of the group found themselves hunted down and surrounded by monsters. Tyler bravely fought back, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Dave's voice suddenly echoed over the loudspeaker, instructing them to activate the fire alarm. As the monsters closed in, Ted told Tyler to protect the family and bravely confronted the creatures with an axe. The monsters descended upon him, but Tyler, with no ammunition left, activated the fire alarm. Jets of salt water gushed forth, dousing the monsters and causing them to disintegrate in agony. Though they were saved, Ted had sacrificed himself for their survival. With the eclipse finally ending, all the monsters retreated through the gate. Laura and the children ventured outside to find Garrett waiting with a gun. He aimed at Tyler, believing that their world was no longer theirs to inhabit. But before he could act, Dave intervened, striking Garrett in the head with a fire extinguisher. As they struggled, a colossal monster emerged from below and devoured Garrett, slowly swallowing him whole. The group quickly retreated to the medical unit, concocting a salt mixture in a cylinder. The monstrous behemoth drew nearer, ultimately smashing through the doors. However, Dave managed to hurl the canister at it, causing a violent explosion that reduced the monster to ash. Laura embraced Dave. While the world lay in ruins, devoid of monsters, they realized that life would once again find a way to thrive, and light would always prevail over darkness. Will Laura and Dave survive? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Flick Spoilers signing off.